Hello, listeners, and welcome to Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela and Mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
This is our podcast about sailing and cruising on the East Coast of the United States. Is it going to be okay, you think?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it should record fine on my side, so as long as it doesn't break up enough between us,
right,
we'll give it a try.
Right. The Skype video might not work out, but as long as you record on your side, we'll be just fine.
So everybody's back to good health on your side?
Yes. After getting through our COVID experience, everyone's back to good health. I've been skiing a couple times. Today is a heat wave here. It was 12 degrees this morning when I woke up. That's 12 degrees Fahrenheit for you in the continent. And 3 previous days it was below zero every morning. And I think Monday when I was skiing, the temperature did not get above 5 degrees, and yesterday it did not get above 12. So a bit chilly.
Good for skiing. I mean, right? Keep the snow from melting.
Yes.
But...
And tomorrow it's supposed to be 55 and rain.
Ooh, there goes all the snow.
Right. And then, of course, Friday it'll be 20 degrees out and everything will be frozen.
Right.
But
ice. Oh.
That's the way it is.
Have you been watching Olympic skiing?
I have. I've watched bits and pieces of it. And actually, we've had at the ski area at Gore, where I'm on ski patrol, we've had some similar events for sort of the up-and-coming people, right? So not the people who are at the Olympic level and not even the people who are below that, but sort of the entry point for sort of competitive slope style and big air competitions and stuff. So we've had those things going on at Gore all last week and this week, and I've been there for that. And even though they don't spin and twirl and fly as high as the folks on the Olympic, it's still jaw-dropping when you see these, 14 and 15-year-old kids doing these things. It's just remarkable.
Cool. Are there any upstate New York skiers on the Olympic team? I didn't see any, but I haven't been watching.
Yeah, not that I know of. I don't pay that close of attention to it. I will tell you, in the Olympics, when they say the snowboarder or the skier in these big air things does, a 720 or a 1240 or whatever it is, and they show it in super slow motion. Even in slow motion, I can't count the number of turns they're doing. It's too fast. Because they're spinning on 3 axes. It's not just on one axis. It's like 3 axes. It's like a corkscrew or whatever. It's like, how do they do that? Just remarkable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But, the juxtaposition of the amazing things that the athletes do with all the politics and the money and the drug testing and all this stuff, it's... I have a hard time with all of it.
Yes. Well, politics and all that kind of stuff seems to have infiltrated everything. And, I understand how you can practice to be a marathon runner or a cross-country skier. I mean, I get that. But how do you practice doing these big air maneuvers? Right? I mean, I know they do them into pools and stuff, right? Or into, bodies of water.
Yeah, they do that in Lake Placid.
Yes.
Not too far from you.
That's right.
They have the jumps and I've seen them do that in the summer.
Yeah. So, they practice into water and stuff. But still, jeepers, I don't know. It seems like it's just remarkable to me. Well, yeah.
Well, me as a non-athlete and an indoorsman, all of these things blow my mind as to how people get this good at all. There's just such a gap between what I see myself being able to do, right, even with hard work, and what they do is truly incredible. And I've seen a lot of this with women's hockey. I think people that have listened to the podcast and that I was involved in the athletics at Clarkson and kind of was on the sidelines when the women won the 3 national championships as an advisor, and it's pretty cool because 6 of those women are in the Olympics, 4 on the U.S. team, 4 on Canada, 1 in the U.S. and 1 in Czech. So I've been watching that a little bit because I know them and I know how hard they work.
Yeah.
and they've worked in the past. So that's kind of cool. So I see that difference between, like me, I took my godchildren out ice skating this week for the first time. They'd never been skating, and the difference between that and what these Olympic athletes do is just mind-boggling. And I know it's the same with skiing.
Yeah,
right?
it's the same with any sport, right? There's like the world-class folks are just they're different. right? They're clearly a different species than I am. Whether it's Einstein or whether it's a musician or whether it's, a marathoner or whatever, a hockey player, they're just different. They have a set of skills that the average person does not. So, yeah.
Agreed. So, shall we get into EP 55?
Yeah, let's do that one. On today's podcast, we have a guest, Scott Wells. He sails on the Chesapeake Bay, and I had a great chat with him about his sailing adventures there. Before we dive into the podcast, Mike, I just wanted to thank our supporters. We have a new supporter, and that's Raymond. So thank you very much, Raymond. And he joins a pretty good list of some of our other recent supporters. We have Robert James and Andrew and Eugene and Andy. So it's been really nice to have people supporting our podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree, Bela. And this was kind of a great follow-up to episode 54, where you talked a little bit about how you get on a crew for a boat. And this is a nice follow-up to that. And as the title gives away that you mentioned, today's episode is about the Chesapeake Bay. And this is also of interest to me a little bit because I lived in Northern Virginia from, I think, 1992 to 1997 when I was a professor at George Mason University. And we have friends from our time there that I still have. And he had a big power cruiser, big boat. So we spent some great weekend days out on the Potomac, and we even went up to the bay a few times during my time there. So I've been on the water there, not in a sailboat, but it is a beautiful place, and I have some great memories there. Bela, one question that might be relevant before we jump into the conversation with Scott, and that I was thinking about is, are there any differences between sailing on a river versus sailing on the ocean? Like the Potomac you can actually sail on in places because it's so wide that you can get a small sailboat in there no problem, and people do that all the time. But are there differences in how the boat operates or what you have to do or anything like that?
Yeah, there sure are. There's some pretty significant differences, at least in my mind. Whether it be the Potomac or a big bay like the Chesapeake Bay or a smaller bay like where I have my boat on Narragansett Bay, versus being out in open water or out in the ocean. The major difference is it's actually much more relaxing to be out in open water. It's much more relaxing to be 10 miles offshore in the Atlantic Ocean. Why? Because there's nothing out there to hit, right? There's no buoys. There's probably no other boats, or if there are other boats, you'll see them coming. There's no crab pots or lobster pots. You don't have to worry about the water being shallow. So from that perspective, sort of navigating and keeping busy, watching everything and making sure there's nothing's going to come up and hit you, or you're not going to hit anything, it's much more relaxing. However, the waves can be certainly different. So the waves in the ocean tend to be spaced further apart, and they're much more sort of rolly. Whereas the shallower the water, the waves get closer together. So the period gets closer together. In essence, the frequency goes up for you engineering folks. And the amplitude also tends to go up. So they get closer together and they get steeper. So the way the boat behaves in that particular type of water is very different, right? One is sort of a slow rolling motion, and the other one can be sort of a much more choppy motion. And this is when the weather picks up, right? If the wind's blowing 25, 30 knots, the wave patterns are going to be very different. I'll say the other nice thing about being out, typically when you're further offshore, the winds are steadier and they're sort of from one direction. And if they happen to be from a favorable direction, you can set your sails and you don't have to adjust anything for a long period of time because you can go in that direction for a long time. You're not going to hit land. Whereas when you're on Chesapeake Bay or Narragansett Bay, oftentimes, you can sail for 15, 20 minutes in one direction, but now you have to turn because there's land going to be in your way. So to me, those are the major differences. Navigation is much more complicated, a lot more things going on, particularly at night. It becomes, at least for me, it's much more confusing being close to land at night. And that has to do with all the lights. There's all sorts of lights on land. The primary navigation lights for mariners are either green or red. That's what marks the channel. Well, traffic lights are also green and red. And you'd be amazed at all sorts of, lights that you can see on land that you can't tell how far away they are. Depth perception at night is a real challenge, at least for me, certainly. So it's oftentimes hard to tell. So you really have to pay attention at where you are when you're sailing at night. Again, out in the open ocean, you don't see anything except the stars and the moon and maybe a shooting star once in a while.
Cool. Interesting. Thanks. I thought that might be a dumb question, but it's an interesting answer. So maybe it wasn't so dumb. But with that, maybe let's jump right into the conversation with Scott Wells. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good, Mike. Let's go. Well, we made it and we're connected.
There we go.
So thanks, Scott. It took us a while to get this set up, but here we are.
Yeah, we've been working on this one since last summer. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. So, where are you geographically right now?
So we are at the top of the Chesapeake Bay. There's a peninsula that juts out called Turkey Point that has the Turkey Point Lighthouse on it, and you can turn left to go up the Northeast River where I am, or you can turn right and you end up at the C&D Canal.
Got it.
So. Yeah, because I listen to I've listened to all your podcasts. I'm a big fan, and I'm really you sail in a part of the world that I'm not that familiar with. So I'm really curious of going both ways, exactly where you are as well.
Yeah, well, right now I live in upstate New York,
right?
So up near Albany, about an hour north of Albany. And it's about 12 degrees out here right now, and we have about a foot of snow on the ground.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, you guys were sort of right in that whole thing that happened last week, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we got a good storm out of it. So, yeah, the boat is up near Providence. It's on Narragansett Bay, not quite all the way up as far as Providence, but it's up quite a ways. And the primary reason it's there is because one of my two sons lives there.
Oh, okay.
And the other son lives here, close by to us. So it's Narragansett Bay is a great place to sail. You got great access to Long Island Sound, Block Island,
Sure.
Cape Cod, the whole thing. So it's a great place to keep a boat. And he's about 5 minutes away from the marina. So he's also sort of my watchkeeper over the boat, I think
keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I think he was there the other day knocking snow off the cover. So, many thanks to him for doing those things.
I'm a little familiar with, when I was in the Navy, I used to be stationed there at New London. And of course, we did a few trips in and out, that end of the Long Island Sound. But I never really got any further north than that, water-wise. So,
Yeah. Well, I did this trip from Nova Scotia down to Baltimore. Where I was crew for a person and his wife who I met through Salty Dogs, right? So the Salty Dog Sailing Association I think that's what it's called, Salty Dog Sailing Association.
Yeah, the Salty Dogs, yes.
Yeah, and they do their rally down to the islands in the fall, kind of in November, I should say. They go down to the Caribbean, and then they have a rally back from the Caribbean back up to Norfolk usually. And they also do a summer cruise every year. And the summer cruise is typically somewhere on the East Coast. And so they have a crew listing, captains looking for crew because oftentimes, it's just a couple. And some of these passages, are multiple nights long. And, two people, a couple is tough. If you're sailing 24 hours a day for 5 or 6 days in a row, it's a challenge. So anyway, I threw my hat in the ring there, and they called me, and we had a good chat. And as a matter of fact, the podcast I just recorded, which will come out just before this one, was all about how you find crew and how to become a crew on
Sure.
on sailboats, the various different crew finding sites and sort of the questions to ask, etc. So if people are interested in that, they can listen to the episode just prior to this one.
Oh, good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm certain that I listened to that. You were talking about. I mean, I think you guys came through our area of the bay, I don't know. I don't really remember if you maybe anchored in the Sassafras, Bohemia, or you went on to Annapolis. I can't remember that.
No, those Sassafras. Yep.
Sassafras, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty when you're pretty much adjacent to Turkey Point coming north. It's immediate right.
Yeah.
Love the river. Love going up the Sassafras. It's often said that it's the most beautiful river on the bay. So we're proud to have that close to us.
Yeah. I've done a fair amount of sailing, chartering on the Chesapeake. My wife and I took our ASA 101, 102, 104 courses there out of Havre de Grace, out of a ASA school in Havre de Grace.
Bay sail.
Yes, bay sail. So that was our sort of first exposure to the Chesapeake, and we really loved it. I mean, it was just so nice, and so many places to anchor. So many different places to visit. Can get a little hot in July and August.
Yes. Uh-huh.
and I've been through, the C&D Canal like 3 times now, doing some transits. Right. And, the upper part of the bay is nice, and the lower part of the bay is nice too. I think the Chesapeake is just a marvelous, marvelous place to sail.
Yeah, there's a lot to do and a lot to see. I mean, you could spend, a pretty fair amount of time just boating around the Chesapeake and visiting, from here to Virginia, which, hopefully, in another year and a half or so, when I get retired here, we'll be able to spend a little bit more time doing that sort of thing than we do right now. But there's plenty to see and plenty to do. But, and I definitely want to, make the trip up north, up your folks' way and poke around up there for a bit as well at some point in time.
Yeah. Well, it's a relatively easy trip. The only overnight you sort of have to do is the coast of Jersey.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that'll be everything else you can do in half a day hops at the longest.
Gotcha.
The coast of Jersey, depending on your mast height, there's a couple places you can go into Atlantic City.
Right.
But depending upon, the winds and all that kind of stuff, you may make it or not. But if you get up early, you can do it. If you leave Cape May early in the morning, you can probably make it to Atlantic City, or maybe it's...
So we've been...
Yeah.
I've been working on, and I still haven't done it yet because COVID sort of interrupted everything. We have, of course, Circumnavigating Delmarva that a lot of folks around here do. And that gives you, same thing, it gives you an overnight it depends on which way you go, from Cape May to Cape Charles or Cape Charles to Cape May. But, that, actually the ARC, they typically have, but that's one of their sort of
training runs. Yeah.
Yeah. Their warm up cruises is like, first go do that first. And then, we'll work our way from there, until to the point where you can do the Caribbean 1500 or whatever. But, it's not going to be this summer, but maybe next summer. It's just like planning it out and doing it and trying to stay gainfully employed.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about how you got started in sailing.
So I have around here we did a lot of crabbing, obviously, as a very young man. With rowboats and, old wooden rowboats and whatnot. And I had an uncle of mine that lived on the Middle River, just north of Baltimore. And I used to go spend some time in the summer with him and his family. My cousin, we were fairly similar in age. And he had, I'm not even sure what it was. It was a little bigger than a sunfish, but he had a sailboat that just sat on the beach out front, and we just pushed it out in the river and hoisted the sails, and away we went. and it was good fun doing that, and so that kind of got me hooked there. And then I had some friends of mine around here, that had a couple of sunfishes later on, and we did a lot of that. And it's just sort of, that probably all started when I was maybe 8 or 10, something like that. And there's been a lot of power boating in the middle as well. I mean, we've done our fair share of that. But I got married, and my wife and I, we bought a Venture 22, a McGregor Venture 22.
Yeah,
it's our first sailboat, and then we bought a Catalina 25 pop top.
Yep.
Which was real good. And then we had a Hunter 28.5 for a while. And then at that point, my kids were at the point where like, Dad, we're tired of going slow. We want to go fast. So we actually sold that.
Yeah.
And we bought ourselves a little Maxim powerboat, 25-foot powerboat that we ran the heck out of that thing on the bay for 11 years. And then when the kids, got older and moved out and moved on, we sold that, and I bought the CNC 35 that I have currently.
Yes. Very nice. Yeah. And so what kind of trips have you done? How do you find that? First of all, let's talk about the boat. What year is
Sure.
it? You said 35-foot CNC.
Yeah, it's a 1986. It's kind of a funny story, but I worked for Ceto Northern Chesapeake, here on the bay for a few years a while back. And we had the powerboat at the time, but I was talking about my boss, Gary, and he knew that I was looking to start sailing again. And he called me up one day and he said, "Scott, are you interested in sailing? You want to do this again?" I said, "I sure am." And he said, "Have I got a deal for you? We just pulled a CNC 35 up off the bottom on the Gunpowder River, and it's sitting at Edwards Boatyard down in Baltimore." So I took a run down there and took a look at it. And when I, they say sunk, but I mean, it had water probably up to your knees in the cabin. The Chesapeake
Sure.
Bay's, the rivers aren't that deep around
Yes.
here, but it did have water in it. And I went down and I opened it up. They had, pulled it out and closed it up. And of course, I had, fungus and everything everywhere growing in it. But I had done a couple of overnight races with a friend of mine that had a CNC, and I just fell in love with the boats. His was a 40, I believe, landfall 38 actually, and I knew it had good bones, and that's the difference between the wife and I. Is she's looking at the aesthetics, and I'm looking at the bones. But I knew it had good bones, and I called a friend of mine who's a very knowledgeable mechanic and boat guy, and we went down and took a look at it. We turned the motor over. The diesel was good. It didn't have any water in it. The transmission didn't have any water in it. So
Wow.
I basically bought it from Progressive Insurance for nothing.
Yes.
Pretty much, because at some point when they have a deal like that, now the Progressive folks have to worry about getting a truck there and loading it on a truck and taking it somewhere and cutting it up or whatever. So
right.
They pretty much gave it to me, and it's been sort of a labor of love for 8 years now, I guess it is. So yeah, I've been inside and outside and through it and under it, and we're still working on it.
And is she in the water? Are you sailing her, or are you still working on it?
No, we pull it out much like you. We pull it out every winter.
Oh, okay. So it's in the water.
It's sitting at a marina about 7 minutes from me right now,
Sure.
called Bay Boat Works on the Northeast River, and then we'll put it back in May, and we keep it in a slip, a little town across the river from us called Charlestown. We keep it over there, and we do. My wife and I do charters. We do some sailing charters here and there with it through the summer, plus our own trips that we do.
Yeah, very nice. So talk a little bit about the Chesapeake for our listeners, and talk about some of the your favorite places to go and cruise around and visit.
Oh, sure. So my being the sailor and fairly limited time on what we have, my area, the Chesapeake's pretty much from maybe the Choptank River up through up north here, up through the C&D Canal into the Delaware Bay. But obviously we have Annapolis. That it's I mean, what can you say? It's a great place. It's a great place to go. Having never been to Newport, which I do want to do that one of these days. We want to get up there, but yeah, there's we spend a lot of time in a little town on the eastern shore called Rock Hall. That's kind of one of our favorite spots to go.
Yeah, we chartered out of there a lot. So I've been to Rock Hall a bunch of times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I know
a
lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a waterman town, it's a waterman town with a boating problem, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, there Rock Hall, we get down the Eastern Bay there to St. Michael's.
Yeah.
St. Michael's is a great place, great historic place to go to. Cambridge. Just a lot of nice little places down there. The thing about the bay is it's relatively shallow. I mean, there's a lot of ship traffic. You have to be careful with that. But the bay is plenty big enough where you can stay well out of the shipping channels and pretty much go wherever you need go, for sure. Although a lot of people for whatever reason, like to ride between the buoys up and down and drive some folks crazy every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's no crab pots between the buoys.
Oh my God! Yeah, I matter of fact, well, I was listening a week or two ago. I was listening to one of your podcasts. You guys were talking about the oyster pots.
Yeah.
Up your way, and I'm like, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, you got to be careful. It's especially you get up our way when the crabs are moving. In the fall, like September, October. I kind of caution people, you might not want to go out at night, unless you're going slow enough and keeping an eye out to avoid whatever's out there. But, we have like most everywhere else, we have a lot of go fast boats, here on the river. And sometimes I see them flying up and down the river and I'm like, oh my God, but I don't know.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Everybody's got their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and up around here, like say, so you were chartering out of Havre de Grace, which that's the Susquehanna River.
Yeah.
And the Susquehanna River, the Susquehanna River is the biggest freshwater source for the bay, and that runs all the way 400 and some odd miles to Cooperstown, New York, all the way up through upstate PA and upstate New York.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
It's probably somewhere up around your area, I guess. I'm not sure where you are in relation to Cooperstown, but that's where it all starts.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a couple hours away from Cooperstown.
Are you?
Yeah.
And then, Havre de Grace is a great town. The Susquehanna River, as we were speaking, is a nice deep. It's a very deep river. That's the nice thing about being over there. Got some great marinas all the way up at the end. Some great restaurants. That's the one thing with the bay here, and I'm sure it's probably the same where you folks are. But a lot of good seafood. A lot of good places. A lot of good tiki bars.
Yeah. Here
and there. So the Bohemia River is another. We call it the 5-foot river. It's not literally 5 feet deep, but I mean it's literally flat as a pancake. It's just the same depth no matter where you go there. And then you work your way up to the canal itself. And I actually used to drive a tour boat there on the canal for 5 or 6 years. A few years back, we used to do 2-hour tours on the canal. So I have that all memorized in my sleep, all the details and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. What's the name of that one little town where there's a little anchorage?
Chesapeake.
Chesapeake City.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you folks, I think you anchored in
we
there,
did.
Right in the Anchor Basin. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I just came by there today. There's actually been a few folks even now anchored over there, but they were all cleared out today because it's icing over pretty good, and that's where the Army Corps of Engineers is for the canal. So they'll keep it pretty open, but yeah, it's fun. There's a good little restaurant, tiki bar there, and there's some free dockage if you get there soon enough. There's free dockage in town and whatnot. And Chesapeake City is just a beautiful, quaint little town. And that's the south side of Chesapeake City. And Chesapeake City is one of those towns where the canal split it in half. So you have the south side, Chesapeake City, and then you have north side. And on the north side, there's Schaefer's Canal House, which, I mean, that's been there my whole life. I'm not even exactly sure when all that was established, but that's where the pilot boats are for the pilots transitioning from the Chesapeake Bay pilots to the Delaware Bay pilots. And that's always exciting to watch when the ships are coming through, and you're when we used to do our boat tours, it was really exciting to kind of trail along and watch the pilots up and down and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff to do up around here for sure.
Yeah, there really is. So a couple of things that takeaways I had from the times we've been on the Chesapeake is it's a nice mud bottom, so it's good holding. So anchoring is easy.
Yes.
Right? Everywhere. Yeah. It just seems like no matter where you are, you got good holding.
Right.
Not a lot of weeds growing on the bottom. So that's, to me, was great. And there's just so many little nooks and crannies that you can anchor in. It's just like they're all over the place. Here on Narragansett, it's not quite as rich with anchorages. Right?
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's you guys are really fortunate down there because you can go, if you're out on the bay and a storm's coming up, you're 5 minutes away from an anchorage. No matter where you are on the bay, you're 5 minutes away from an anchorage.
Yeah. Because I failed to mention in my little tour of the bay, I failed to mention Wharton Creek and Still Pond and those places, and they're huge. So we're right on. Obviously, we're right on the track for the snowbirds. Going south in the fall and coming back up in the spring. The Still Pond's a great little anchorage over there. Although I've sat, 2 years ago, I've sat probably the windiest anchorages overnight that I've ever sat through in the bay it's always been in Still Pond for whatever reason. Well, some of those nights where you have to sit in the cockpit all night and just like, I hope this anchor holds. Yeah. Because you can get right up next to the beach there really easy. But it's got a beautiful sandy beach in there, and there's 100 boat in the summertime on a weekend. They're just crowded in there like heck. So
we spent a real windy night down in Tillman Island. Yeah. Down there in I forget the name of the bay, but it's off the main bay, and there's a bigger bay that Tillman Island sort of projects out into, and
that would be Eastern Bay,
yeah. So there's an anchorage off in there, and man, we anchored in there one night, and it was howling, and I remember next morning, our anchor was dug in so deep we had trouble getting the anchor up. Because, it was like, this thing is stuck. And it really took us like 15, 20 minutes of sort of tugging on the anchor really slow to kind of get it out of the mud. It was in there so deep.
Wow.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the bay is, like I say, it's fairly shallow. I mean, I quite honestly, I'm pretty sure the average depth works out to be like 20 some odd feet, beside with the exception of the shipping channels. But the thing about it is, it's so shallow when the wind pops up. When we get a good northwest, wind coming through, or with some of these squalls coming through, the waves just they're short and steep. So they're like hitting a wall trying to bang your way through them. We don't get any of this nice gentle swell stuff that you would, I guess, out on the ocean, but it can get nasty. Trying to pound through the waves when we're having a squall for sure.
Yeah. So. Again, for our listeners who may be thinking about coming to the Chesapeake Bay, we talked about some of the nice places to visit, kind of in the northern half. What are some of the challenges in sort of dealing with the Chesapeake Bay? What things have you found to be challenging?
Well, so there is shallow water. You've got to be careful with that. I mean, I'm fortunate. My boat's, I have a centerboard boat, so it's 4 feet with the keel and 6 feet with it down. So, 4 foot's pretty good. I mean, but there are places. I mean, where you folks were there in Havre de Grace and the Susquehanna, that large expanse right off of Havre de Grace is the Susquehanna Flats.
Yep.
Which is basically where all as I tell people that, that's where all the ecosystem kind of starts in the bay, because it's just acres and acres of seagrass there. and the little microorganisms start, and then the little fish come to eat that, and then the big fish come to eat the little fish and the crabs, and and my wife gets on me occasionally, and maybe I shouldn't mention it, but I always try to talk to people that are from PA that we have on our charters, or even New York. I have people that drive down from New York to do this, but whatever you put in the water up there comes out down here.
Yeah.
So when just above Havre de Grace there is the Conowingo Dam, and when there's a lot of a rain or snow melt or whatever up in PA and New York, once they start cutting the floodgates open, all that junk comes through. So it all ends up with us. So I guess you have to be careful of that. After and it's fairly simple to find out, when they're opening the gates and whatnot, because they're very good at letting you know that. But I mean, I've literally seen, 2 years ago where they can turn our river looks like chocolate milk, in 24-hour period of all the silt and whatnot coming down, and we get logs and barrels and whatnot. So that all kind of, you got to be careful of that, I would say. I don't think with bugs and overnighting. I mean, it's usually nice overnighting, in any anchorage. Like you're saying, it can get pretty hot and humid in the summertime. July and August is if you have an older boat like my boat, where there is no, it's the 260 AC.
Yeah.
Put the hood, the scoop in the forepeak and turn your fans on. But yeah, that, and just a lot of traffic, a lot of commercial traffic. So, a lot of commercial traffic at night. So I try to talk to people about, if you're going to be out at night, you need to understand what lights and signals mean. And I mean, you don't want to get in a situation where you get the tug captains on Channel 16, yelling at you, because they will do that in a heartbeat.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure they probably do it up your way as well. I'm sure, but.
Sure. I mean, they're professionals. That's what they do for a living. And sometimes us yahoos sort of, screw them up.
Right.
Right.
Oh, true.
Yeah, it really is amazing. I mean, Narragansett Bay is the same way. No matter where you are in the bay, you see land. So at night, you see all sorts of lights. Right. You see traffic lights on land that are red and green.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. You see tail lights on cars. You see all the buoys, and it gets very, very confusing. And you
got to really be, and here's my pet peeve. I love the LED lights that everybody buy, and I have them on my boat, for the cockpit and whatnot. I just have an issue with people that like to turn them on and leave them on while they run up and down the river at night. Because you got your red, your green, and your all around white lights for navigation. And then you got blue lights, you got red lights. Some people do have green. It's like,
right. It's like, what are you doing? You're like asking for trouble.
Yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine. I'm like, really? Do you really need to do that?
Yeah.
But there you go.
Well, I'll tell you, when I've been out on passages, and you're far enough offshore that you can't see anything, it's remarkable how sort of mellow everything is out there.
Sure.
Because there's nothing out there.
Yeah.
Right? You don't see any lights. You don't see, and sometimes you're like happy when you see a light. Oh, there's another boat.
Yeah, there's something out here.
Right. And it really is. I find it much more stressful. Maybe stress is the wrong word, but we'll use it. Much more stressful, to be in the bay or close to shore. And at night, it's like really, really challenging. And I try not to sail at night, not to be out on Narragansett at night, even if I'm pretty familiar with it now.
Yeah.
And last year, the last sail of the season I did with my son, we actually did come back in the dark. The last couple miles was in the dark. And, we've been through there 50 times. And it was still like, are we in the right spot? We're looking at the GPS. We're looking at the landmarks and, just double checking.
And I often think about that too. And as most probably sailing folks are, I listen to Andy Shell's podcast a lot, and I think about that, and I'm thinking when you're offshore, just like you're talking about it, I don't want to say boring, maybe that, and again, maybe that's the wrong word, but you would think, especially you get on some of these, trade wind passages that these folks do, and you set the sails for 2 weeks and you just go.
Yes.
And there's really no one around, and then I juxtapose that with us being in the bay, and it's probably true where you folks are too. I mean, everything I want to do pretty much is south of here if I want to take a trip, and the wind's always from the south, right?
Yeah.
So it's always a motorboat ride, unless I just want to, tack. And, as bay sailors or river sailors, I do a lot of single handing as well. So you get really good at just that sort of thing. And I'm not sure how it would be out in the ocean where you just sail for days and days and days and not have to really worry about anything.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think for me, sort of the 2 to 4 day passage is ideal. Yeah. It's just like it's long enough that you sort of get in the groove and the rhythm. You're probably far enough offshore. You're not seeing much, but you're not out there for 20 days. I think 20 days in the trade winds. I mean, after a while, it just gets kind of boring, like you're saying. It's like
I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, I would really like to try that boredom, at least once here, and I'm certain that I will. But we again, and we do. I do a fair amount of night sailing around. I have folks that when I charter. Some folks like to stay out. They want to go out for the full moon,
sure,
that sort of thing, and a bottle of wine in the full moon. So I'll take them out and come back after dark. But I know where the power boaters like to run. So I stay well away from all of that, and head on a swivel, kind of a hockey thing. Just keep looking.
Yeah. So Scott, what's on your bucket list?
Man. The Delmarva circumnavigation for sure. My big deal here, it's funny. We have this conversation every once in a while. When I was in my 30s, I wanted to go around the world. And then when I was in my 40s, I wanted to get down through the Caribbean, maybe to South America. When I got into my 50s, I just wanted to get to the Bahamas, and now that I'm 60, I just want to make it to Florida at this point because things change and, life changes.
Sure.
But, I want to do the ditch. I want to go down the intercoastal and pop outside. I had my heart set for a while on going and spending the winter at Buki Harbor. My wife's not real big on that idea, quite honestly. So, we'll see how all that goes. But I have good friends that live down in Islamorada in the Islamorada Marathon area, and I mean I have a place to go.
Sure,
I just need time to do it and to get down there. So
well, I number one, I highly recommend retirement. So I'm on my second year, and it's
my goodness,
fabulous.
I can't imagine just yet.
And I think the ICW is great. I've done it twice now, and some of it in, some of it out. And it's just great. It's just it's sort of a different view you get of the world when you're going down the ICW.
Sure. And actually, I was thinking. I was actually thinking about this 2 weeks ago. I was thinking, I think if I could do like a 10-day, like if I'd take 2 weeks off, I think I would like to go down. Go down to Virginia, hop in the ICW, and go out and end up out at Ocracoke Island. Off the Outer Banks.
Yeah.
Because we vacation down there a lot on the Outer Banks, and we always go to Ocracoke, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to sit here in my sailboat here on Silver Lake and just do nothing for a week or two. So, and that's totally doable for me, with a good 8 or 10 days off. So
absolutely,
that's kind of in the back of my head right now, and I'm like, maybe we'll start planning for something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. What else? Anything else on your bucket list?
I'm sort of at the point where, I don't really have boat envy. I mean, I go to the sailboat shows
Yeah.
and
Sure.
Annapolis show and everything, and I look around and um, I'm happy with what I do have, so I don't really have a boat in mind.
That's good.
I mean, so I watch, like probably a lot of folks listening, I watch Captain Q, on YouTube, and I'm always interested in what he's finding, as far as boats, older. And I'm sort of an older boat guy, I guess. I tell people when they come on my boat, I said there's no push button anything on this. It's all muscle, up and down and around. So, but I'm sure though, as in a few years here, that's going to get old, and I don't want to say I'm not going to end up in a trawler, because who knows, we may do that someday as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to. So I think what I want to do really is I want to get to the point where, I'm officially retired, and then I have all summer long, like you're saying, I could take a whole summer, just bop around the bay here and really not have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's, and then, the issue here, as probably in a lot of cases with the wife, is the grandchildren.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, honey, we're just beyond the Chesapeake Bay here somewhere, so they'll come. I'm sure they'll come and see us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this past summer we had the grandkids on the boat for a week.
Oh my!
And when they got home, when they got home, the first thing they said to their parents is, "We want to go again." So.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a great attractor.
It is, yeah, and I'm really I have my oldest granddaughter is just really takes to the boat, and I think that and my son not so much, and his wife not so much, but she likes spending time on the boat with us, and
Sure.
I'm just trying to instill that in her, for the adventure piece of it, and this is something you can do,
Right.
So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, but I probably. Besides the around the Delmarva, probably the other thing is just getting myself in a position to get retired, so we can just spend time doing this sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's we can always pop. You could pop down to Potomac and up the Potomac to DC, which I work there every day, pretty much. But it'd be interesting to me to come by water for sure.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it is kind of neat to see I've been to a lot, here in the East, there's places I've been to via land, and then you come by water, and it's like totally different. It really is. It really is an interesting contrast.
Yeah,
The world looks different when you approach it from the water.
Yeah, it sure does.
Let's, hey Scott, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. We've been chatting for 35 minutes here.
Sure.
Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't? Anything else you want to share?
I think so. I think. No, I think we're pretty good. I mean, we talked about our boats. We talked about the bay. I think, so I sort of, I don't know if you've been on Jeff Wettig's podcast yet or not, but
I have not.
And I'm sure you'll end up on it one of these days. He's big on that sort of thing, but we've done this thing before where we both use the podcast on our own deal.
Yeah.
So, but I need to get to the point where I could talk to you a little bit more about Narragansett Bay, so maybe we'll have to schedule another meeting, kind of flop the,
Sure.
turn
Love
it
to do
the other
that.
way and let you talk about it, because I'm really interested about, the area up there. And again, once we reach retirement, then, it can come up there and float around for a month or two. And, I'd really like to do that. And look at all the whatever you can recommend for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to have that conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, we could schedule another one and talk about that stuff. That'd be great.
Good.
Yeah, and it's not a long hop for you. It's Cape May. You can probably do in a day, right?
Yeah, I can get there. Yeah, it's 90 miles. Well, a day and a half.
Long
It's 90
day.
miles.
Yeah, let's say 2 days to Cape May for you, and then depending upon you want to go through this. I went through New York City twice now. It's unfreaking believable.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Hell's Gate and all that.
I mean, in a good way, right? I mean, the East River is kind of crazy because there's just so much traffic and helicopters and high-speed ferries, and I mean, it's just like sensory overload. But sort of the approach to New York City from the south, you know, and you see the skyscrapers in Manhattan and stuff. It's just, I mean, it brings a tear to your eye. It's unbelievable.
Breathtaking.
Yeah,
I'll bet.
it
Yeah,
really is.
I'll bet.
Statue of Liberty, Verrazano Narrows Bridge. I highly recommend at least one way, you know, whether you're going up or coming back, but to go through the city. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting to do as well. A lot of folks around here that do that make the hop from here to like Block Island,
Right.
do their thing, and then they come back through New York, and that's probably what I would do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely want to you know, definitely I just think like you're saying, that would be breathtaking to come through with all the city and the Statue of Liberty. And but I understand that the traffic is crazy there. I can imagine that. Oh my gosh, you know, on a summer weekend it'd be nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to time it. You got to time
Sure.
it the right way.
Yeah.
Well, great, Scott. Hey, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation talking about the Chesapeake and your sailing adventures. You're a great guest. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And like I say, we'll turn the tables here in a few more weeks, and we'll talk about the Narragansett Bay, and we'll go my way. I'm not as you know, you guys are really good at staying on schedule with putting your podcast out. I have one. It was called Around the Bay with Scott and Sharon, which I'm not very good at staying current with it. I need to be a little bit better than that. But and Sharon, my wife, she's kind of reluctant to come on Mike and talk about all this. So now it's just called Around the Bay Sailing Sundance. So, you know, we'll swap it around, and I'll have you a guest on my podcast, and we'll have some fun.
That'd be great. Thanks again, Scott. Take care.
All right, Bela, thank you very much.
Bela, that was a great conversation with Scott. And I really learned a lot more about the Chesapeake, even though I lived there for a long time or near it for a long time. So thanks for that. When you're thinking about different sailing locations, how do you evaluate different locations? What are the criteria that you have? And then how do you evaluate the Chesapeake based on your criteria?
That's a good question, Mike. You know, I think it sort of depends on what you want to do and what you're looking for. If you're a person who likes to race sailboats and you want to, you know, race around the bay every Wednesday or Thursday night and on Saturdays and Sundays, then I think you're going to look for a different type of environment than someone who wants to go sail for 4 or 5 hours, anchor someplace, you know, spend a day there, maybe go on shore, do some tourist stuff, come back on the boat, you know, and then go sail someplace else for 4 or 5 hours and spend another day or two at the next location. So I think it's very different. Those are kind of different things that you want to do. I will say that the Chesapeake is one of my favorite places. I think if I had my druthers as to where I would like to have a boat and sail, I think it would be the Chesapeake. And here's my reasons why. Number one is it's big, right? It's 100 and some odd miles long, so it's a big body of water. And there's a great sailing community there. So there's a lot of other sailboats, a lot of really good sailing community. And there are hundreds and hundreds of places that you can anchor and pull into. And the bottom of the, you know, if the water gets shallow, the bottom is mud. So if you're going to hit something, you want to hit mud, not rocks, right? So if you're sailing up in the coast of Maine, there's no mud up there. It's rock. So if you get into shallow water inadvertently, you're going to feel it all of a sudden. Chesapeake Bay is mud, which also means it's easy to anchor, because anchors hold in mud very well. And there's just tons of places that I won't say are tourist. Well, there are touristy places, but there's other quaint little towns that you can go to and stay at. And there's just, or if you want a secluded anchorage, there's plenty of secluded anchorages. So to me, it's really nice. I will say the downside to the Chesapeake is July and August can be hot and with not a lot of wind. But every place has its seasonal, you know, ups and downs. So, and the Chesapeake is a place that we've chartered a lot. So I've never owned a boat on the Chesapeake. but there are a lot of charter operations on the Chesapeake because it's such a great place to sail. So we have frequently chartered boats out of Rock Hall on the Chesapeake, which is on the Maryland side. And it's really a great place to visit, a great place to go. And I highly recommend it as a place for someone to explore, whether you want to do that with a charter or whether you want to, take your own boat there.
Cool. I mean, I think it's important. I don't know. I guess in everything that I do regarding business and really my personal life, I like to kind of make the criteria explicit and clear to myself, right? So when I'm making some decisions, and when you're going to take a sailing trip, that's a pretty big investment in time, and if you're going to charter and money, right? And there's risks and there's all these things. So I think this is really cool. So kind of thinking through, it's if you need to charter opportunities, right? Check, see what's out there. Prices, I'm sure, and what's available in the marketplace, and whether you want, we've talked earlier about with a crew or without a crew, right? What are the opportunities? I think I liked how you put it, knowing what type of sailing you want to do and then aligning that with the geography and the weather of the place that you're going to. How good is the fit, right? And then if you'd like to do some sightseeing along the way, right? Aligning the availability of anchorages and dock facilities and mooring balls, right? With things to do and things that you want to do. So that really seems like kind of a neat set of criteria, basic criteria, to evaluate different sites. And it's kind of cool that, and also the downsides, as you said, the weather in midsummer and things like that. So it's neat to have these pros and cons, and then you can choose, do I want to go to Florida? Do I want to go up to Maine? Do I want to go to the Chesapeake? Do I want to go to Hawaii? Whatever, right? And you've got a set of criteria on which to make those decisions. So that was really interesting for me because this is the way my brain works. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's cool. And I guess I'm sure every sailor has their own criteria. But I think it helps. And then you know what questions to ask when you're checking in with other sailors, or you're asking questions if you call a marina to inquire about things or something like this. Seems like that'll help you ask the right questions and how to choose your destination smartly. And then I guess how to prepare too, in terms of, you and I have talked about this, what clothing to bring, right? What equipment you might need, all these types of things. So that was cool. Yeah. Thanks. That was a really great, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and these days, with all the various different online resources one has, whether it be people listening to podcasts like this one, or Facebook groups or other sailor websites, you can find out so much information about a potential destination. And that's how I learned. That's how we discovered the Chesapeake, right? It was through various different online resources, and people are very, the sailing community and the boating community in general is very helpful. So as a matter of fact, this morning, before we just got together here online, I belonged to a Narragansett Bay Facebook group, and somebody asked a question about actually the marina that I keep the boat at, Safe Harbor Cove Haven Marina. And, they were asking a question about it. So I just, before I got online here with you, I typed out a 2.5 paragraph little response to their question. So it's very helpful. So there's a lot of resources. So, and it helps you as you read those things, it helps you hone your criteria as well. So it's not only helpful for information, but also for me, it always helps me kind of hone in, what am I looking for? Yeah, that sounds good. It doesn't sound good, because oftentimes I just say, I just want to go sailing. Well, that's too broad a category. You got to narrow it down a little bit. So a lot of good online resources.
Yeah. And having the criteria too, I think it makes it less likely for you to be a sucker for good marketing. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are marketing people, but I'm always very, I don't know. I try to be a little bit critical of what I read when the people who are selling the product are also promoting it. And I really like these third parties to triangulate kind of what's promised versus what reality looks like. And if you have criteria and you know what questions to ask, you can really, I think, get to the bottom of making the information that you need to make a good decision. And yeah, those criteria might change over time, and it's not a strictly, okay, I weight this 5 points and I weight this 3 points and I add it up and that's what drives the decision. But at least it gives you what I call a cognitive frame, or a framework, right, in which to make an informed and somewhat rational decision. And before, again, you spend a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Shall we wrap this one up, Mike?
Sure. Listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. And we hope that you found the conversation interesting and thought-provoking as we did. And as always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting application. And also tell your friends about us. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest for the show, drop us a line and let us know. And we'll see if we can get them to be on the show. So signing off from chilly upstate New York. See you soon, Mike.
Sounds great, Bela. And from over here in Münster, Germany, auf Wiedersehen, and see you for the next episode.